Thank you all. So, talking about psi as a threat, it's about talking about the fear of psi. And fear of psi is not very often dealt with in parapsychology, but I think it's an important topic. And fear of psi we can find on a personal level. It's about fear of the experiences of paranormal or the supernatural on the individual level. And this is strongly connected what Sigmund Freud called the fear from the uncanny. Then we have fear on the level of science, the fear of participants, of experiments, and it was Kenneth Batchelder who did research on this. He worked at this already in the 1970s. And we also have fear of scientists to deal with this topic or to report paranormal experiences. For example, anthropologists who make this kind of experiences in the field, and they are hesitant to talk with their colleagues about it, and often they wait until they are retired in order not to jeopardize their career. And then we have also psi phenomena that, or the fear that psi phenomena would challenge the basic assumption of scientific experiments. We know about the experimenter effect. Normally in science, we have the experimenter as a neutral person that has no directly influence on the outcome. But we know from parapsychological experiments that is not the case. And there is no reason why this should not appear in mainstream scientific experiments. And then we have also fear of psi, and that is not openly confessed, but we have fear of psi in justice system because modern Western jurisdiction depends of the idea of a rationalistic and reliable reality. And I will talk about this latter point by way of an example of the Carole Compton Poltergeist case. And this is the case of a young Scottish woman who unexpectedly had to spend 17 months in Italian prisons in the years 1982 and 1983. So the materials I used for reconstructing this case was mainly from the archive of our institute, was correspondences, transcripts of telephone calls and interviews, copies of witness testimonies and so forth, and also copies of British and Italian newspaper articles. I also used a book that is written by Carole Compton herself together with a journalist, in which she reported about what she experienced in Italy during the time. So I first have to give a brief outline of the case in form of a timeline so that we know what we are talking about. In 1982, Carole moved to Italy to her boyfriend, Marco Vitulano. They met in Scotland where he worked, but he has to go back to Italy to serve for the military. And so in June of 1982, Carole started to work as a nanny for Emanuele, a 2-year-old boy, at a house in Rome. And in this house, strange things happened. So the picture of a Madonna fell from the wall for no apparent reason. A water boiler made strange noises, and the electricity meter was spinning quickly. And that's happened all when Carole was in the vicinity. In July that year, Carole went with a boy to his grandparents' vacation home in Ortisei. Ortisei is a little town in the Italian Alps. You can see it here on the picture. And the mom of this little boy was in Paris making holiday with her boyfriend. In July 11, a fire broke out in a bedroom in that house. Carole was outside the house on a walk with a boy. A short circuit was assumed to be the cause of the fire. And because the house was damaged strongly, so the family moved to an apartment of a friend in the same town in Ortisei. 2 days later, a fire was detected in a garbage can in the kitchen. There was a smoldering ball of paper on the top of the garbage. Carole was still asleep when it was discovered. Another 2 days later, a third fire broke out in a bedroom of that other house. Carole played during the time with Emanuele in the children's room. Enrico, the other person present, noticed the smoke while he was in the shower. And then these people got a little, uh, unquiet, so to say, and they sent Carole back to Rome. They ended the employment, and Carole soon found another work. She began working for the Cecchini family as a nanny for their 3-year-old daughter, Agnese, on the island Elba. And we can see it here. It's close to the shore to Italy. And it was the second day when she was there. The cotton sheets and mattress in the bedroom caught fire while Carole was in the bathroom next door with Agnese. And at the very same day, Carole and grandmother Cecchini, and she didn't like Carole a lot because she didn't like her because she was a foreigner, she was not an Italian. So, but they walked past the statue in the living room, which then fell to the floor without being touched. And the next day, a cake stand fell from the middle of the table onto the floor, which woke Carole up. She was sleeping in that room, in the living room. And while she was making her bed, a blue glass vase inexplicably fell off the shelf. And then the very same day, Agnese was still sleeping alone in a room of her mom's, bedroom of the mom's, and the cot in the mother's bedroom caught fire. Agnese slept in the large bed next to this cot, and the mattress was slightly burned. Agnese was not hurt, but Carole has been outside the room when the fire was detected. But then the police took her to the women's prison in Livorno. You can see it here on the picture. Either is this or this building. I'm not sure. Accused of arson and attempted murder. So Sergio Minavini became her lawyer. And the interesting thing at that time was that under Italian law, an accused person can be held in custody indefinitely until the innocence is established in a court trial. So that was a bad situation because she even was not able to speak Italian, even roughly. So Carole's mother was informed, or she informed the Scottish radio station and a newspaper about the situation, also in order to get funds for a trip to Italy to support her daughter because she was not has not herself the money. And then there also was a Scottish lawyer that was brought in, and at that time the sensationalist press coverage had already begun in Italy and in Great Britain. Strega, that's an Italian word for witch and witchcraft, were in the headlines. And the Italian journalist did some research and they linked then the fires in Elba to those in Ortisei, and then the police started to investigate these Ortisei fires. So then in January 1983, Carole was already 1.5 years in prison. The British parapsychologist Guy Playfair, many of you will know that name, he read in the newspaper about the case and he contacted Minavini, the defense lawyer, and put forward the poltergeist hypothesis as a likely explanation. He also informed other parapsychologists about the case with a letter, and half a year later, Minavini asked Professor Hans Bender, the founder of our institute, for a second psychiatric report. And finally, in December that year, the trial at the court of Livorno took place. The charges were 1 case of attempted murder, 5 cases of arson. The defense finally waived Bender as a parapsychological expert. The reasons are not 100% clear, but that's an interesting point. The verdict then was Carole was found guilty of 2 counts of arson and 1 count of attempted arson. As Carole had already been in prison for 17 months, the remainder of the 2.5 year sentence was waived. She had to leave Italy in the course of 24 hours, what she then did. So, were the strategies of the defense lawyers? Minervini was convinced of Carole's innocence from the beginning. His assessment of the situation was initially, since there was neither evidence of the crimes nor regrettable motive, the court must acquit Carole. And he didn't like the media hype surrounding the case. That was different with the Scottish lawyer Nisbet. He feared that the case would be forgotten and provided the media with sensationalist information. So he said, if we don't do anything, then maybe Carole will stay for 4 years in the prison until this case comes to court. And this should put pressure on the Italian prosecution and court. So, but after about 6 weeks, Nisbet was removed from the case because of the dissenting opinion on the best strategy for Carole. Now, Minervini initially was not very interested in a parapsychological explanation for 2 reasons. And the first was that Carole herself didn't want to be associated with the paranormal at all. She didn't believe in it and associated it with witchcraft and superstition or mental illness. She suffered from accusation of witchcraft in the press. And the second cause was that Minervini himself, he told a journalist, but it won't be easy. The penal code in Italy doesn't take these things into account, and there are no precedents of trials in which paranormal facts have been considered. It is obvious, therefore, that this constitutes an enormous problem for me. It will be the first Italian process in which parapsychology is mentioned, and for me, it certainly won't be easy. So this was the second cause because that he didn't like this paranormal parapsychological explanation. Now there were psychiatric examinations of Carole, and the question were, can Carole be held fully responsible for her action? Is pyromania an explanation for her behavior? And were the arson's sudden irrational acts, or were they cold and carefully planned? The question, if she does not have anything at all with these arsons or be responsible for the arson, that was even not considered. And the results, and these are quotes from the book by Carole Compton, at the trial, the one psychiatrist said, she has an abnormal personality, signs of profound immaturity, emotional instability, and a weak and inefficient willpower. She has a naughty personality. And the other one said, the subject cannot be described as psychotic. She is responsible for her action, but her personality does coincide in many ways with a profile of a pyromaniac. Hans Bender, who interviewed Carole in prison in Italy, he considered the pyromania hypothesis absurd, the hypothesis of deliberate arson implausible, and Carole's statements credible. He identified typical characteristics of a poltergeist case with Carole as a focus person. What was the evidence? In at least 4 out of 5 fires, Carole was in the vicinity of the source of the fire. In no case was Carole seen in the room where the fires broke out, or that she was dealing with matches or lighter. In no case was Carole seen as directly traceable cause of the strange phenomena, such as the falling of the pitcher or the cake stand. And now we go to the evidence regarding the fires. Here, firemen report from the fires in Artisay, And these are quotes. Normally, flames start at the bottom and work upwards, but in this case, the flames had traveled downwards. It was very strange. The fire seemed to have started on a stool in the main bedroom, but had then gone out. Then it had begun again inside a wardrobe a couple of feet away. There were no signs of inflammable liquids found at either fire. I've been a fireman for 30 years, 38 years, but I've never seen fires like those before. And the second report, I only jump over it. It was a very strange that the mattress burned only on the surface and so forth, great heat, but no flames. And this expert said, I cannot explain what caused them. And then the judge asked him if there's a connection to Carole, and this expert said, there is nothing to link the defendant with either of these fires. So this is the evidence regarding the fires itself by the experts. And then the court, the reasons for the judgment, where, and this is quoted again out of the book, the court had decided that I had started the fires out of pathological nostalgia, the desire to get back to Marco at whatever cost. The judges thought I'd probably used spirits to start the fire, which explained why no traces of inflammable substances were found. And I'd deliberately knocked over the statue and the cake stand and other objects, then pretended I didn't know why they'd fallen to create an atmosphere of unease. With this reasoning, the fire experts' reports were completely ignored. There was no evidence whatsoever of the defendant's guilt, and the only certain fact at this point was Carole has already been in prison for 17 months with no evidence. And then there's of course, press reported on the trial, and there's an interesting quote from a newspaper. She had arrived as a love-struck babysitter, then managed to surround herself with a murky aura of mystery until she almost appeared to be a witch. And I mean, this is crazy because the press made her a witch, not she herself. So the trial was described as a woman bordering on stupidity and finally became a star of the tabloids. Is the babysitter really endowed with paranormal abilities? The doubt is legitimate also because it is the simplest way to clarify what the trial failed to address, the lack of evidence and motive. But is parapsychology reality or invention? This is difficult. This is difficulty in judging, even if the sentence shows that the facts and not parapsychology guided the final judgment. In a court of assizes, it could not have been otherwise. And now we come to the relationship of psi and jurisdiction, and I can only scratch the surface of this topic because it's really interesting. So we learned in a court of assizes, it could not have been otherwise. The point is, in court, an important element is what is a fact. And here a quote from a text. It is assumed by the dominating opinion in natural science and jurisprudence that supernatural phenomena do not really exist. That means that they are not facts in the sense of concrete events or conditions that have occurred in reality. As paranormal phenomena are not facts under criminal law, they are not the subject of legal proceedings. Belief in the existence of paranormal phenomena and psychic ability is treated as superstition. So this is the official meaning at court. And that leads to some interesting questions. If psi phenomena were considered as facts and not as superstition, what would this mean for jurisdiction? If psi phenomena occur in connection with a focus person, who would be the perpetrator and who the victim? If the probability of occurrence of psi phenomena can be increased by certain techniques as claimed in magical and shamanic practices, what consequences would this have for jurisdiction? And finally, does the acceptance of paranormal phenomena of the superiority of mind over matter pose the danger of reintroducing medieval witchcraft trials. And I would say the Carole Compton case is an example of how the judges have chosen to uphold the prevailing or dominant order of reality, accepting a number of inconsistencies in the reasoning behind their judgments. And the final thought, perhaps modern Western style societies are not yet mature enough to adequately deal with the uncertainties that official recognition of psi phenomena would entail. And I thank you for your attention.
So we have, of course, time for questions.
Thank you, Gerhard, for this nice detailed presentation of the case of Compton. I just want to make a parallel with another case which was in 1960 in the US. It was in Inwood, so in California, and it was in a case lot, a care lot, sorry. There was 200 stone like that thrown on the care and bolts and notes. And guys, this was Wadeo, something like that, was judged as the perpetrator of this effect, and he was in a trial also. And finally, Raymond Belles, known parapsychologist, was admit to make a testimony, to make a point during the trial, and they finally accept that it was for supernatural causes.
Okay.
So it's exactly the same. They don't have this in their letters and their rules, but if they have enough information, finally they say, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I make a comment. Hans Bender was thought he could be successful as an expert at the court because there was a case in Freiburg 2 years before that, and there was also a young adolescent, and there were fires, curtains started, fires everywhere in the apartment. Fire started, and in this case, it did not come to court. So, but it was different because Hans Bender knew the prosecutor, and they first make psychiatric examinations, and aim of that examinations was, did he tell the truth or not? Because first this boy confessed of committed the arsons, and then the day after he withdrew the confession, and he said it was due to pressure of the police, and so it never came to court. The situation in Italy was totally different, so I think he would not have been successful.
I have a question here, Gerhard. First of all, this is really a frightening case, really, and not just because of the phenomena that were popping up, but because of the way it was processed through the courts. So a number of years ago, back in the 80s, there's the case of Christina Boyer, who we know as Tina Resch, of course, and it had nothing to do with any paranormal activity, but she had been a poltergeist agent that was recognized. But the issues around her case seem to be moderated by the political environment in that area at the time. Not even the media, but the politicians who wanted to get reelected. I was wondering if you saw anything like this as you were going through this case.
Not directly the politics, but there was a lot of pressure on the court because the international press said this system in Italy is outdated. In Great Britain, that never would happen, that she could be held for 17 months in jail, in prison. And so that was a big issue. And I think even that the court decided to speak her guilty because it would be hard to justify that she has been 17 months in prison and is not guilty at all. So, but this is only speculation.
Thank you.
Yeah, she had to be tried in a separate county. Yeah, for one of those reasons too.
Fantastic case. One thing I wonder, I don't know the right classification the way you would put this, but I think it would really bear an additional aspect to this particular analysis to look at the broader justice system, because one of the things you might find is for that particular court, what other types of injustices happened, because that might play into it as well. Is the bad judgment of that court might not just be about this case. So it shows that the bad judgment got rendered here, but you might also find a pattern and a history of very poor judgment for particular courts, regions, etc. Because we see the criminal justice system, I can only speak for the United States, but I can't imagine it's confined only to the United States. We keep finding people convicted on horribly shoddy evidence and all these types of things, so that new technology like DNA technology is freeing people from death row and all these types of things. And that, you have prosecutors coming back admitting that, yeah, I knew the person was innocent, but I just went and prosecuted him anyway. And they still can't get the courts to release these folks. So I just wonder if it would help to see, was that a case there, or no, this court had a really good judgment and a great record of putting out very fair judgments, but for some reason in this instance, it was really about the paranormal that just blew their minds so much that they could not render a good judgment.
I cannot see anything about other Italian cases with no paranormal component or element. But in this case, it was really, I mean, as I told, I can only scratch the surface. There's a lot in the archival material, how they are meandering, and the press came in, and then the defense lawyer considered, shall I take the paranormal explanation? Is it good? And I mean, the defense lawyer was very pragmatical. He only had the goal to get her free. But Carole herself, she said, I have nothing to do with it, and I don't want to have this paranormal shit in this all. So she wanted to have the truth in it, and the truth for her was, I have nothing to do with the fires. Period. So there it's very rich, and as I told you, I mean, I even has been 5 minutes longer than I planned, and there you could talk 1 hour on that case, and it's still a lot of facets that are interesting.
On that note, though, we do have to move on to Everton's talk.
Yeah.
I do encourage you to talk with Gerhard afterwards about this, because like he said, it's a very interesting topic. And thank you, Gerhard.